delegates present here. On behalf of ITS College of Pharmacy, myself, Dr. Madhu Verma, along with my co-host, Ms. Sagrika Maji, welcome you all on the day 5, session 2nd of online 5-day FDP on drug engineering challenges and innovations, sponsored by AICTE Atal Academy. I am extremely honored to get this opportunity to introduce our eminent speaker for this session, Professor Satish Kumar Sharma, Pro Vice Chancellor, Global University, Saharanpur, UP. During his illustrious career span of more than 3 decades, he has many achievements has served at various positions like Vice Chancellor, Global University, Academic Council Chairman, URDC, Chairman IQAC and Chairman NAC Committee, Global University, Dean, School of Pharmacy, Global University, Professor and Director at Sundardeep Group of Institutions, Ghaziabad, Professor and Principal at Lloyd Institute of Management and Technology, Greater Noida, visiting faculty at DIPSAR, Delhi University. He has also served as the Chairperson, Academic Council and Co-Chairman, Academic Advisory Committee, Sundardeep Group of Institutions, Technical Head or Chief Executive, Microdiagnostics, Delhi. Professor Sharma is the Professor, Consultant and Practitioner in Psychology, Alternative Medicine, Human Values and Professional Ethics, Spiritual Sciences and Yoga Meditation. Currently, he is the Chairman, CEGR Pharmacy Council. He is also the National President, Pharmaceutical Educational Society. He has conducted more than 50 yoga and meditation workshops. During his fabulous career, Professor Sharma has served for 15 years in Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam Technical University, Lucknow, affiliated institutions. Dr. Sharma completed his B.Pharm from DIPSAR, Delhi University with distinction. He passed his M.Pharm Pharmacology examination from DIPSAR, Delhi University with a gold medal. He obtained his PhD degree from MJRP University, Jaipur. He has also completed PDCTM, NDDY, MGAM. He has chaired many scientific sessions in national and international conferences. He has served as the member of Local Organizing Committee, 60th Indian Pharmaceutical Congress, New Delhi, co-chairman LOC Medical Services at 65th Indian Pharmaceutical Congress held at Delhi, NCR, co-chairman IPGA Academic Division, Chairman Organizing Committee, India Pharma Convention held at DIPSAR, Delhi University, Chairperson Organizing Committee, National Seminar organized in association with IPGA Welfare Trust at SDPC Ghaziabad, Chairman Organizing Committee, National Conference held in association with IHPA, Co-Chairman LOC Medical Services 70th Indian Pharmaceutical Congress held at Delhi, NCR. Professor Sharma has played a key role in many revolutionary movements for the upliftment of the pharmacy profession. He has also given important suggestions to AICTE for making necessary amendments in pharmacy institutes approval norms. Professor Sharma has also advocated for various amendments in curriculum of human values and professional ethics course in the AKTU curriculum. He has also played a key role in revising the PCI Education Regulation 1991. Dr. Sharma has delivered health talks in various TV shows, CNN, IBN and Pragya channel. He has participated in more than 100 national and international conferences as a resource person. He has handled research projects in collaboration with prestigious research institutes such as All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi, Artemis Heart Institute, Gurugram, Biotech Park, Lucknow, and DRDO, New Delhi, Institute of Technology, Ghaziabad. He has published 120 research papers, articles, and abstracts in referred national and international journals and abstract books. He has authored 2 books and 10 book chapters. He has supervised 20 M.Pharm and 8 PhD research projects. He has delivered more than 100 invited talks, FDP and PDP sessions on important topics such as time management, essence of teaching, yoga, holistic personality, stress management, human values, and professional ethics, current trends in pharmaceutical education, research methodology, cardiovascular pharmacology, and nutraceuticals, etc., at various national and international platforms. He is a reviewer and advisor of many national and international journals. He is editorial board member of many journals. As a life member, he has been actively associated with many professional societies like India Pharmaceutical Association, IHPA, APTI, SPER, and CEGR. During his career, he has received many national and international awards like Best Athlete Award COP, Delhi University, Best Article Award COP, Delhi University, MPharm Pharmacology Gold Medal conferred by Deputy Health Minister, Academic Excellence Award conferred by Indian Pharmaceutical Association, Award of Excellence conferred by Johnson & Johnson Limited, Award of Appreciation by Magsaysay Award winner Dr. Kiran Bedi for rendering dedicated health services at Tihar Ashram, Outstanding Paper Presentation Award, Best Research Paper Award by International Journal of Drug Development, Best Research Paper Award by Global Journal of Pharmaceutical Research, Shiksha Gaurav Award conferred by CEGR, Innovative Academic Leader Award presented by Global Skill Foundation, Academic Excellence Award conferred by SDGI, Best Pharmacy College Award by Center for Education Growth and Research, Teaching Excellence Award by Local University, IAECT International Award for Outstanding Contribution towards Pharmacy Education and Research, Academic Excellence Award by Nirali Prakashan, etc. I welcome you, sir. Welcome, sir. Sir, you are muted.
Thank you, Dr. Madhu Verma ji. Thank you so much. Am I audible, please?
Yes, sir. You
Okay.
are audible.
So, can I start my proceedings?
Yes, sir.
So, my screen is visible to you, please?
Yes, sir. Screen is visible.
Okay. So, a very good morning to all the delegates present here. I am really glad to be amongst all of you, my old mates, my old friends, as previously I had devoted a decade in Ghaziabad area. So now all these sweet memories are alive now. And I am especially thankful to Dr. Sadish and Dr. Praveen Gaur for inviting me to deliver a talk on this important topic. Now, my topic for today's presentation is development of nutraceuticals as therapeutic agents for the prevention and treatment of metabolic syndrome. This topic I have chosen as two terms here, nutraceuticals and metabolic syndrome. Both are close to my heart. Nutraceuticals is derived from natural sources, food materials, food, herbs, and all these things. And metabolic syndrome, indeed, it is an emerging field. In fact, nutraceuticals as well as metabolic syndrome, both are emerging field, and both these terms need to be addressed. So I have tried to relate metabolic syndrome with nutraceuticals in my presentation. My presentation will be covered under following heads. First, I will very briefly discuss about certain facts about metabolic syndrome. Then I will relate metabolic syndrome with cardiovascular diseases. Then I will give a brief note about nutraceuticals, different categories of nutraceuticals. Then cardioprotective nutraceuticals will be discussed. Then therapeutic effects of cardioprotective nutraceuticals will be shared. And Finally, clinical evidence of important nutraceuticals will be shared, nutraceutical market, and finally the conclusion. Metabolic syndrome, this is a very important term. In fact, when we speak about metabolic syndrome, then obviously we need to relate this term with the risk factors of cardiovascular disease. This metabolic syndrome, of course, was coined in 1950s, but our great scientist Revan, in his Banting lecture in 1988, he observed the effects of dyslipidemia, hypertension, and hyperglycemia. Observe dyslipidemia, hypertension, and hyperglycemia in the same individuals. So it was an important lecture delivered by a scientist, a great researcher. He was an endocrinologist. He was professor emeritus in USA. And this lecture was delivered in the memory of Banting, Sir Banting. And what he's observed, or what all these findings he shared in this Banting lecture. So he observed that three things were noted in the same individual: dyslipidemia, hypertension, and hyperglycemia in the same individual were noted. And he named this term as Syndrome X. He emphasized its role as a risk factor for cardiovascular disease as well. During his lecture itself, he emphasized that all these factors will ultimately lead to the development of cardiovascular disease if remain untreated or if remain unaddressed. So in metabolic syndrome, when we speak about metabolic syndrome, then we speak about cluster of risk factors. Means we can't say that there is dyslipidemia, so this is metabolic syndrome. There is only hypertension, this is metabolic syndrome. No, not like that. There should be cluster of these three symptoms, or in the subsequent slides, we will come to know the latest definition of metabolic syndrome. Okay, then central obesity is an important event, important part of metabolic syndrome. Insulin resistance is also an important risk factor for metabolic syndrome. Then all these, it was also noted by Revan that all these risk factors ultimately are considered as risk factors for cardiovascular disease. He also noted that these risk factors are interrelated following common pathways and mechanisms. Like obesity is related to insulin resistance, obesity is related to atherosclerosis. So there are common pathways and common mechanisms for all these risk factors of metabolic syndrome. So I have already mentioned you that this term metabolic syndrome was coined way back in 1950s, but scientist Hermann Heller, he observed in 1977 that metabolic syndrome has these three factors. I emphasize that obesity is the part, diabetes mellitus, hyperlipoproteinemia, uricemia, and hepatic steatosis are all these. He combined all these factors, all these cluster of factors, and he gave this name metabolic syndrome. And he also advocated that all these symptoms, all these risk factors of metabolic syndrome are ultimately the risk factors for generation of atherosclerosis. Then in 1988, as I have mentioned in the previous slide, that a great scientist, Revan, Gerard Revan, he was a scientist from US. He was a great endocrinologist, renowned endocrinologist. He gave the cluster of these symptoms a name, that is Syndrome X. Then in 1998, WHO came out with the definition of metabolic syndrome, when they emphasized on the role of hyperglycemia and or insulin resistance plus other metabolic conditions as mentioned above, that is hyperlipidemia and hypertension. All these metabolic conditions combined with hyperglycemia and or insulin resistance will form metabolic syndrome. So it was a raw definition by WHO. This definition later was refined by NCEP, National Center for National Cholesterol Education Program, ATP. Third, so it was emphasized that clusterization of risk factors, all these risk factors previously mentioned, it was discussed and it was inferred and that all these factors are risk factors for cardiovascular disease. Then in 2003, American Association of Clinical Endocrinologists highlighted the central role of insulin resistance in the development of metabolic syndrome. So then in 2005, all these different associations, International Diabetes Federation, NHLBI, National Heart, Lung and Blood Institute, American Heart Association, WHF, then IASO, they all combined, discussed at length. They came out to a final conclusion on harmonization definition. Before 2005, there was not a clear definition, there was not a satisfactory definition about metabolic syndrome. Then in 2005, all these important associations and institutes, they discussed together, finally concluded that metabolic syndrome is a cluster of risk factors. It has 5 risk factors. It will be mentioned, these will be mentioned in the subsequent slide. Metabolic syndrome risk factors. So these risk factors were discussed and finally analyzed in 2005 by different associations mentioned in the previous slide. These are 5 important risk factors for the development of metabolic syndrome. Waist circumference. These associations concluded that this is an important event or this is an important parameter for the development of metabolic syndrome. Waist circumference was taken into consideration in view of abdominal adiposity. This is an important parameter. So they decided that waist circumference more than 94 centimeters in males and more than 80 centimeters in females are the candidates who are at risk for the development of metabolic syndrome. Then second risk factor, raised blood pressure. Systolic blood pressure more than 130 mm and or diastolic blood pressure more than or equal to 85 mm mercury. So these are 2 limiting levels of blood pressure, and these are also the diagnostic tests also. So because physician, all these healthcare professionals would like to know what are the how can we diagnose metabolic syndrome. So these are risk factors, and along with them their values are also mentioned, their upper limits are also mentioned, so that physicians can diagnose the patient or the individual with a metabolic syndrome condition, with a risk who can develop metabolic syndrome, and accordingly management is required. Third point is raised FPG, fasting plasma glucose, equal to or above 100 mg per deciliter. Raised triglyceride, more than 150 mg per deciliter. Reduced HDL cholesterol, that is less than 40. Then insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes mellitus is also here, and cardiovascular risk factors are also are related to this. Why? Because first there will be these symptoms, there will be risk factors. Depending upon the severity of these risk factors, there are chances for the development of type 2 diabetes mellitus, as well as there are chances, probability for the development of cardiovascular disease. So these are 5 risk factors. These are 5 diagnostic procedures or diagnostic parameters for metabolic syndrome. And out of these 5, it was also decided in 2005 that out of these 5 factors, out of these 5 risk factors, any 3 of the 3 risk factors are present, then a person can be considered as a patient of metabolic syndrome. Then according to these risk factors, we have to find out methods or means to manage metabolic syndrome. So there is a need to normalize blood sugar level. There is need to normalize blood pressure. We must treat hyperlipidemia. Then abdominal obesity. Obesity needs to be addressed. Inflammation needs to be addressed. Atherosclerosis needs to be reduced. Endothelial function should be improved, and insulin sensitivity should be increased or normalized. So these above factors or all these above management procedures and mentioned this slide are all these cardioprotective measures. So if we want to prevent ourselves, then all these measures need to be taken to prevent a person from development of cardiovascular disease. So I have tried in my presentation, I have tried to correlate metabolic syndrome with cardiovascular disease. Up till now, we have clearly understood that metabolic syndrome, if remains untreated, if remains unaddressed, if remains unmanaged, can lead to the development of cardiovascular disease. So ultimately, in my presentation, the nutraceuticals which will be discussed, they will be according to the preventive role played for cardiovascular system, for prevention of cardiovascular diseases. Now, these are the key facts about cardiovascular diseases. In my previous slides, I mentioned what is metabolic syndrome, what are the risk factors for metabolic syndrome, and how metabolic syndrome is related to cardiovascular disease. Now, since metabolic syndrome ultimately leads to cardiovascular disease, and in my presentation, in the subsequent slides, all slides will be focused on the prevention and role of nutraceuticals in the prevention and management of cardiovascular diseases. So why I have done so, this slide will make you clear why I have tried to address these cardiovascular diseases. See, CVDs are the #1 cause of death globally. More people die annually from CVDs than from any other cause. This is indeed a matter of concern. CVDs now have become the #1 cause of death globally. In the next point, you will see that what is the figure, death rate and total death rate related to heart attack and stroke. 18.6 million people died from CVDs in 2019, representing 1/3 of all global deaths. This is an alarming figure. This is a concerning state. Of these deaths, 85% are due to heart attack and stroke. So it's clear that heart disease is the #1 killer in the world, #1 cause of death, and 18.6 million people died in 2019. And out of these 18.6 million people, 85% deaths, out of there are so many cardiovascular diseases, and out of these all diseases, 85% of deaths occurred due to heart attack and stroke. So there is a need to address how all these risk factors lead to heart attack and stroke. Over 3/4 of CVD deaths take place in low and middle income countries. CVD cases nearly doubled from 271 millions in 1990 to 523 millions in 2019. So just doubled, just see. So, so many healthcare professionals, scientists, government authorities, regulatory authorities are working day and night to curb this CVD, to decrease the incidence of CVDs, but all the measures have failed. That's why this prompted me to give this presentation so that we can prevent the cardiovascular disease. Then global economic impact is worth rupees 906 billion dollars. One person dies every 36 seconds in the US from CVD. And in the last point, you will see that all these concerning facts which are mentioned above, all the deaths, so many deaths which are occurring can be prevented. Yes, so many deaths out of these 18.6 million could have been prevented if we could have addressed our risk factors such as tobacco use, unhealthy diet, obesity, physical inactivity, and harmful use of alcohol. Mind you, these are all behavior risk factors. These are not genetic factors. These are all modifiable risk factors. And again, I have tried to show you the situation is alarming. Situation is out of control. Yes, the situation is out of control, uncontrollable. So many drugs have been researched, has been invented. So many medicines have been invented, but so many new inventions are taking place. Preventive therapy is there, management therapy is there, other measures are there. But still, this slide will show you that heart disease is uncontrollable. Ischemic heart disease in 2000, there were 6.8 millions, okay, who died from ischemic heart disease. But in 2019, 8.9 million people died from ischemic heart disease. Similar to the case with a stroke. In 2000, 5.5 million people died due to stroke. And in 2019, 6.2 million people died from stroke. So this is increasing. Some of the diseases, the health authorities, the government authorities, due to great discoveries and inventions, could control, like diarrheal diseases could be controlled. Then neonatal conditions could be controlled. Lower respiratory tract infections could be controlled. But if you see the top three, these are uncontrollable, and these are all cardiovascular diseases. Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease is also indirectly related to cardiovascular disease. So the situation is alarming. Now you can see here. This we have discussed. Now we will see this one. Yeah. So 11.9 million and heart disease. When I speak about heart disease, it means coronary heart disease. So due to coronary heart disease, 13.2 million, and due to stroke, 11.9 million. So you can see these two, how many percentage it is coming out of 100 if you see. So this is the leading cause of death. Coronary heart disease is the leading cause of death. Now, these are modifiable risk factors for CVD: lifestyle, obesity, hypertension, diabetes, and hyperlipidemia. So all these modifiable risk factors are can be controlled, as these are in our hand. We can modify the diet, we can modify our living style, our lifestyle. Then obviously we can control all these risk factors, and we can prevent ourselves, and we can prevent cardiovascular disease of the society as well. This is the percentage you can see. physical inactivity 31, unhealthy eating. Unhealthy eating 21%, overweight and obese individuals. Overweight and obese, this is a very serious condition. This is threatening the humankind as the people who are overweight and obese. The number of people, the percentage of people is increasing day by day. It is increasing because to meet the demand of the modern day life, to meet the stressful life of the modern day life, it has become essential part that people are overweight. I will reckon here that in US around 40% people are obese or overweight. High cholesterol. So these three you can say: unhealthy eating, overweight, and high cholesterol. So these three parameters can be controlled or can be addressed by preventive therapy. So here comes the role of nutraceuticals. Now, this modern lifestyle, has given birth to or given the gift to us in the form of these lifestyle diseases. Two important lifestyle diseases are hypertension and diabetes. Because we have to meet the demand of the modern day life. To meet the demand, we are in hurry, worry, and anxiety. We are in a stressful situation. We don't have much time to eat natural food. We resort to unhealthy eating habits. We are in a stressful situation even during our sleep. So this has given birth to hypertension and diabetes, along with many other lifestyle disorders. So hypertension and diabetes, if remain uncontrolled, will lead to the development of hyperlipidemia. Hyperlipidemia will cause endothelial dysfunction. This endothelial membrane is disrupted. There is inflammation, inflammatory mediators, inflammatory markers are released, worsening the condition further, leading to myocardial ischemia, culminating in heart attack and stroke. And these are silent killers. Heart disease is a silent killer. You must be knowing that this is taking the life even at a young age in this fast-paced life. So there is really, it's very important. This situation has to be addressed. Now starts the remedial measures. Up till now, we discussed about the risk factors of metabolic syndrome, how these risk factors are related to development of cardiovascular disease, culminating to heart attack and stroke. Now I will discuss about preventive and management strategies. Hippocrates, he's considered as father of medicine. He is considered as father of modern medicine. He advocated a beautiful quotation. He wrote, "Let food be thy medicine and let medicine be thy food." Medicine should be used as food. We are eating food. So what does it mean is, the inference is that whatever we are eating, we should eat as if we are eating medicine. So we should eat less. Whatever we are eating, this should be considered as medicine as well. This is the summary, or this is the ultimate objective of writing this quotation by he's father of modern medicine. Modern medicine means allopathic medicine, but most of the work remained on discovering these natural remedies. He worked and advocated natural medicine, natural remedies. The doctor of the future will no longer treat the human frame with drugs, but rather will cure and prevent disease with nutrition. The famous scientist Thomas Edison quoted. So future means the current generation. It is mentioned here, doctors of the future. Doctors of the future means doctors of the current generation will treat the human frame not with drugs, but will cure with nutrition. So we, as a pharmaceutical scientist, as pharmaceutical researchers or pharmaceutical educationists, we need to explore this important term that is nutraceutical. You see, it depends upon who is wiser of the two. To meet the challenges of the modern life, we have no option but to use burgers, pizzas, and all these things. But the wiser one will not use these things, but will use fruits, vegetables, and other things like whole wheat. Whole wheat is there, with choker. Okay, these things. So wiser one will see. It takes only 1 minute to change your decision from negativity to positivity. Things are there, saliva will come to your mouth, but we have to decide what is good for me, what is bad for me. Nutraceuticals. Now this nutraceuticals, the credit for defining nutraceutical, credit for coining the word nutraceutical goes to this famous scientist, Dr. Stephen D. Fales, who founded Association of Innovation in Medicine in US. This Association of Innovation in Medicine is credited for innovating new drugs for the treatment of various diseases. So he coined the term, he defined nutraceutical as any substance that may be considered as food, part of a food, and which provides medical or health benefits, including the prevention and treatment of disease. Nutraceutical is derived from two words, nutrient in nourishing food or food component. So it is derived from two words. Pharmaceutical, a medical drug, nutrient, a nourishing food. So these nutraceuticals are isolated from our herbs. They can be whole food, they can be fruit, vegetable in the wholesome form, if they are used for the purpose of getting medical benefit or health benefit, then anything or everything can be regarded as a nutraceutical, which is intended or which is providing health benefits. These are different categories of nutraceuticals: dietary fiber, probiotics, prebiotics, polyunsaturated fatty acids, polyphenols, and antioxidant vitamins. Dietary fiber. So being a pharmaceutical scientist or educationist, it becomes our duty to work on dietary fiber. Currently, dietary fibers have come with great promise. A lot of actions have been studied, a lot of effects have been, positive effects of dietary fibers have been studied and have been confirmed, validated. Then probiotics are also promising nutraceuticals, prebiotics. All these are important, and in the subsequent slides, we will come to know what are specific nutraceuticals which are important to study, which are important to develop, which are important to explore further for the development of therapeutic agents for managing this metabolic syndrome or for preventing cardiovascular disease. These are potential nutraceuticals. Antioxidants. Antioxidant vitamins, we all know, vitamin C, vitamin E is there. Then omega-3 fatty acids, lot of work has been done on omega-3 fatty acids. Then coenzyme Q10. This is an important vitamin-like substance, ubiquinone, and a lot of work has been conducted on this important vitamin-like substance, coenzyme Q10. This coenzyme Q10 is formed inside the body. It is formed, and then it serves very important function in respect of heart, and it is providing energy. It forms ATP. So, and mitochondria is the source of ATP, energy house. Okay, we all know. So in the mitochondria, these are formed, and these will produce ATP, energy formation molecules, coenzyme Q10. Another important thing is that coenzyme Q10 level keeps on declining with age. So if an individual is 40 years old, 50 years old, 60, as soon as we goes on increasing, enhancing in age, then our coenzyme Q10 level goes on declining. And so this is a sad part because coenzyme Q10 should be present in mitochondria in sufficient quantities because heart contains largest numbers of mitochondria as heart needs lot of energy. Most of the energy in the body is required, maximum energy, highest amount of energy required by heart muscles. That's why mitochondria are present in heart muscles. So the role of coenzyme Q10 becomes very important. As soon as individual starts developing heart disease, his energy level goes on declining. So he needs more and more energy to meet the demand of energy. This coenzyme Q10 plays an important role. So a lot of research can be conducted on coenzyme Q10. Then polyphenols, fruits, vegetables contain polyphenols, carotenoids, phytosterols, and dietary fiber. Dietary fiber is very important. It should be duly addressed. It should be explored further due to its very promising results. Dietary fiber is the food material or plant material that is not hydrolyzed by enzymes secreted by the digestive tract. These are non-starch polysaccharides, insoluble dietary fibers, celluloses, soluble dietary fiber, pectins, gums, mucilages. Foods rich in soluble fibers include fruits, oats, barley, and beans. Soluble fiber retards gastric emptying. It forms a gel in the stomach, so it will retard gastric emptying. So when it will retard gastric emptying, then it will give a feeling of satiety. Then the individual or person will not be able to consume much of the cholesterol or much of the diet. So in this way, indirectly, it helps to control cholesterol level. So these are important physiological effects of dietary fiber. It reduces cholesterol absorption from GIT. It increases fecal excretion of bile acids. It decreases rate of glucose absorption. And it decreases LDL accordingly. So when it is reducing cholesterol absorption, it is increasing fecal excretion of bile acids. So these effects will lead to decrease in the level of LDL cholesterol. LDL cholesterol is a bad cholesterol. It also increases insulin sensitivity. Because when obesity is decreased, then insulin sensitivity is increased. When this glucose level is decreased or normalized, and when this hyperlipidemia is reduced, then inflammatory conditions are also normalized, so it will reduce inflammation. If total cholesterol is lowered, it reduces triglyceride level and it reduces obesity. So very important actions. These are very important actions of dietary fibers. That's why I mentioned that these dietary fibers, different types of dietary fibers, different molecules, important constituents, active constituents of dietary fibers should be isolated and should be explored for further study. Then these are the results of some of the important. So many journals were surveyed, so many literatures were surveyed, and out of these so many studies, I have mentioned a few important studies here, so that you can conclude something about these, about the potential role of soluble fibers. A meta-analysis of 17 random controlled trials with 916 patients showed that beta-glucan consumption in a hypercholesteremia population significantly reduced LDL cholesterol. So here beta-glucan is producing an important effect. Significant. The LDL cholesterol was reduced significantly. There was significant reduction of LDL cholesterol. So this is the result of 17 random control trials conducted on 916 patients. This is an important finding. Then in 2001, EFSA confirmed that oat beta glucan is able to reduce plasma cholesterol as well. Then American and European guidelines have advocated 5 to 25 have found that 5 to 25 grams per day oat beta glucan is necessary to reduce the blood cholesterol level. So these are very important findings, and in a systematic way, if they can be presented in a systematic way, and further studies are conducted, then definitely some remedies, some definite remedies, some therapeutic regimen can be brought out. We can bring some therapeutic regimen for the treatment or prevention of cardiovascular disease or metabolic syndrome. Then consumption of beta glucan for 4 weeks in 60 patients with hypercholesteremia significantly increased the nitric oxide, but produced no effect on flow-mediated dilatation. So when nitric oxide is increased, then obviously endothelial function is improved as there is vasodilation. When there is vasodilation, then the blood pressure is also lower, and the deleterious effects of atherosclerosis are also decreased. So these are important effects. Psyllium effect is also mentioned here. It is a lowering LDL cholesterol by 10.1 mg. This is again a significant figure. Then if we take psyllium 10 gram per day, then you can say that 3 to 20 gram, there was a significant dose response relationship was found. So these are important findings. 7% LDL cholesterol was found to be decreased. Then finally 14 random control trials, 14 on 531 patients concluded that use of glucomannan in this dose mentioned here 1.24 to 15 gram significantly reduces LDL cholesterol and TG by 15.9 and 11.5 mg respectively. So these three dietary fibers are mentioned here. Glucomannan, psyllium is there, and beta glucan is there. So all these three nutraceuticals, all these three soluble fibers can be explored further for formulating an important nutraceutical as a remedy for management of cardiovascular diseases. Then there are certain foods. The fiber content of certain food is mentioned here so that you can think about their fiber content level. High fiber content is always good in all respect. So we should always eat high fiber content food, but a systematic approach or systematic work is required so that we can set standards that how much amount of this active ingredient should be taken for how many days to treat cardiovascular diseases. So these are food materials mentioned which have high in percentage. Avocado you can see. Then in this slide you can see whole wheat bread contains 7.4% of dietary fiber content. Oats and popcorn contains highest percentage of fiber. So these can be explored further for studies because dietary fibers, if you see the literature, we will find by multiple mechanisms and multiple sites has given promise, has considered this dietary fiber as a potential nutraceutical. Dark chocolate, we always say that don't eat chocolate, chocolate is bad. But mind you, dark chocolates, they contain polyphenols, flavonoids, fibers. But the problem is that it is sweet, very sweet. So much sugar is there, so it is liable to cause diabetes mellitus, insulin resistance, obesity. So now this thing has to be addressed. The chocolate should not be sweet in nature. Sugar content should be minimized. Polyunsaturated fatty acids. Now, this is a very important category. Polyunsaturated fatty acids are called as essential fatty acids. These are crucial to the body's function. Omega-3 fatty acids are alpha-linolenic acid, eicosapentaenoic acid, and docosahexaenoic acid. So these are important omega-3 fatty acids. Eicosapentaenoic acid and DHA are found mainly in fish oils. Rich sources of alpha-linolenic acid are flaxseed, soybeans, canola, walnut, blackcurrant seeds. So these are important sources. So these important food materials, foods which are mentioned here, they should be explored further to isolate the active constituents from them. Then we can isolate these polyunsaturated fatty acids from them. So, and we can form them into functional food or dietary supplement. We can work on flaxseed. It's considered as a very promising nutraceutical. So you can work on flaxseed, soybean. We all know that soybeans contain essential amino acids, and soybean contains polyunsaturated fatty acids, so which are good for heart, really good for heart. We can work on blackcurrant seeds, walnut. So these I have mentioned important nutraceuticals based on literature survey and recent reports. Omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acids mainly consists of linoleic acid, which is found in vegetable oils, corn, safflower, soybean, and sunflower. Studies suggest that omega-3 fatty acids have three major cardiovascular effects: anti-arrhythmic, hypolipidemic, and antithrombotic. So these important parameters are controlled by polyunsaturated fatty acids by acting on different pathological mechanisms. Anti-arrhythmic, it has a vagal effect, so it produces anti-arrhythmic effect. Emerging research evidence shows the health benefits in asthma as well as in diabetes. So how omega-3 fatty acids are so important, you will be happy to learn that about 50% of the US population is consuming omega-3 fatty acids. This omega-3 fatty acids has been used since 2 decades very widely because they have got so many beneficial effects out of this omega-3 fatty acids, and they have fallen in love with this important nutraceutical. So why this is so important? It reduces inflammation, it's anti-arrhythmic, it reduces angiotensin 2. So based on, so due to these above three effects, endothelial function is improved and blood pressure is also reduced. Due to above effects, these effects, there is a decrease in LDL level, there is vasodilation, platelet aggregation is reduced, and triglyceride level is also reduced. Clinical evidence for cardioprotective potential of polyunsaturated fatty acids. Meta-analysis included 47 random controlled trials, and this has 16,511 participants who were hypocholesterolemic patients to assess the effects of average daily dose of 3.25 gram of EPA and DHA for 24 weeks. So this study was conducted for 24 weeks. The result showed a significant reduction in triglycerides of 14%. This is a remarkable figure. This is an encouraging result that triglyceride level of up to 30 milligrams was reduced. Then there is then other studies showed that insignificant reduction of LDL cholesterol, a dose-dependent reduction in TGL level was observed. In a large long-term trial which involved 11,324 patients surviving recent myocardial infarction, supplementation with 1 gram of polyunsaturated fatty acids significantly reduced the risk of cardiovascular death. So this is very important finding, as this study was conducting on myocardial infarction patients who survived myocardial infarction, who just survived a heart attack. Flaxseed also showed lipid-lowering activity. It seems to exert a mild but significant antihypertensive effect as well. Then meta-analysis of random control trial showed CSAM fractions intake is associated with a significant reduction in triglyceride level. Most human studies report that N3 polyunsaturated fatty acids decrease the residence time of VLDL. So this is an important finding. When VLDL residence time is decreased, then we can relieve hyperlipidemia. Results up to recent trials involving 15,480 patients with diabetes and 25,871 healthy participants respectively, published in 2018 and 19, revealed that supplementation with 1 gram per day omega-3 fatty acid did not significantly change the primary composite outcome. So this last finding is a controversial. This is all these findings, all these initial previous findings were showing positive results, but this finding, the last finding, is not showing encouraging results. So these are contrasting results. That's why further studies are required for polyunsaturated fatty acids. Then how omega-3 fatty acids work? Let us explore further. Then triglyceride level is reduced, RLP particles, lipid particles, remnant particles are reduced. It reduces inflammation in the vessels. Endothelial, as a result, endothelial function is improved. Inflammatory markers are reduced. Vasodilatation is produced. Platelet aggregation is reduced, and blood rheology is improved. As triglyceride is reduced, remnant lipid particles are reduced, plaque is stabilized due to improvement in endothelial function, reduction in inflammation, and due to vasodilatation, plaque, atherosclerotic plaque is stabilized. This is an important effect, because once the plaque is destabilized, then it can lead to the development of myocardial infarction or heart attack. Arrhythmia is reduced, mitochondrial function is improved. So in this way, omega-3 fatty acids produce cardiovascular protection. Then probiotics. What are probiotics? Probiotics are live microbial food supplement. They produce beneficial effects. They beneficially affect it beneficially affects the host animal by improving its intestinal microbial balance. Lactobacilli, bifidobacteria, gram-positive cocci. So these are important. This is an important category of nutraceuticals. A lot of work is being done on this, and scientists are beginning to realize the importance of probiotics in the prevention and management of cardiovascular diseases due to their multiple actions. Probiotics actually strengthen the immunity. They also reduce the inflammation in the GIT. So inflammatory bowel diseases are also decreased, and cholesterol level is they protect. That they interact with intestinal cholesterol, transforms it into cholesterol. So in this way, absorption of cholesterol is reduced, and they can and accordingly we can decrease the hyperlipidemia. We can decrease the lipid level in the body. They also reduce the enterohepatic circulation of bile salts through BSH enzyme. Bile salt hydrolase enzyme. Through this bile salt hydrolase enzyme, they will reduce the enterohepatic circulation of bile salts. Bile salts enterohepatic circulation is reduced by probiotics. So what we can infer, what will be the ultimate result is bile salt, there is deficiency of bile salts, there is scarcity of bile salts. So more and more cholesterol is utilized for the formation of new bile salts by the liver. So as a result, cholesterol level is indirectly reduced by these probiotics. Then clinical evidence for cardioprotective potential of probiotics. A recent meta-analysis included 13 random control trials to investigate the effect of probiotics on total cholesterol, HDL cholesterol, triglycerides, and 27 random control trials to investigate the effect of probiotics on LDL cholesterol. The mean duration of studies was 7 weeks. The studies involved normo and hypercholesterolemic participants. The pooled mean net change in LDL cholesterol was 7.35 mg per deciliter compared with controls. There was no significant change in TG and HDL levels. This finding shows that LDL cholesterol was reduced up to 7.35 mg. This is an important finding, as LDL cholesterol is a bad cholesterol. But more studies are needed to define the type of people who would benefit most, the probiotic strains, dosage forms, and the cholesterol lowering mechanisms. So there is a lot of scope for studying probiotics in respect of their cardioprotective effects. Probiotics are considered safe. There is not enough data to confirm the safety of these products. When we innovate any medicine, then safety data needs to be established. This is an important thing. This is an important parameter. First of all, safety issues needs to be addressed, and efficacy issues need to be addressed. If it is efficacious and safe, then one can go further for exploring it further for doing other clinical studies. Prebiotics. These are dietary ingredients that beneficially affect the host by selectively altering the composition or metabolism of the gut microbes. These are short-chain polysaccharides. They promote lactobacillus and bifidobacterial growth in the gut. Banana, tomato, and chicory roots are rich sources of prebiotics. Improved lactose tolerance, and they have anti-tumor properties as well. They stimulate intestinal immune system. There is reduction of blood cholesterol levels. Polyphenols. This is a very important class. We all know polyphenols. Polyphenols, they are antioxidants in nature. They are produced by plants as secondary metabolites. So these are flavonols, flavonones, anthocyanins, flavonones. Dietary polyphenols can affect numerous cellular processes like gene expression, apoptosis, platelet aggregation, and intercellular signaling. Polyphenol-mediated regulation of glutathione alters cellular effects. And the rich sources of polyphenols are tea, red wine, dark chocolate, berries, and black grapes. These are rich sources of polyphenols. So these important nutraceuticals, they have very important role in cardioprotective effect. They produce cardioprotective effects. Tea has been found to protect against cancer and cardiovascular diseases. Polyphenols possess antimicrobial and cardioprotective activities, prevention of neurodegenerative diseases and diabetes as well. Antioxidant and anti-inflammatory activities of red wine are due to the presence of resveratrol. This resveratrol is a very important polyphenol. That's why I have mentioned here. This resveratrol, by different mechanisms, reduces obesity, it reduces diabetes mellitus, it reduces insulin resistance, and it reduces blood cholesterol level as well. So a lot of work can be conducted on resveratrol. This is an important molecule for doing further research in respect of controlling metabolic syndrome as well as for controlling diabetes mellitus as well as heart disease. Now, how these polyphenols are so important, why these are producing multiple effects, why these polyphenols are so much useful for preventing or managing cardiovascular diseases. It reduces LDL oxidation. When LDL oxidation is reduced, then obviously plaque is stabilized. They improve endothelial function. The synthesis of nitric oxide is increased. When synthesis of nitric oxide is increased, then this endothelial membrane, capillary endothelial lining, this blood vessel is dilated, and when capillaries are dilated, then obviously the risk of atherosclerosis risk of heart attack is minimized. It decreases platelet aggregation. When there is vasodilatation, then the endothelial function is improved, then platelet aggregation is also decreased. So LDL cholesterol is decreased, HDL cholesterol is increased, insulin resistance is decreased, it modulates inflammation, polyphenols modulate inflammation, polyphenols reduce blood pressure, and it reduces or decreases chances of atherosclerosis as well. So polyphenols are very, very important. You can see these important actions of polyphenols make them very valuable in nutraceutical therapy. These are important bioactive molecules found in fruits and vegetables. Epigenin. So this epigenin is important flavanol. Quercetin, this is again, this is flavanol, important, found in onion, apple, berries. EGCG, epigallocatechin gallate. This is an important flavanol found in tea. And due to this flavanol, EGCG, tea has been found to be beneficial in controlling obesity or reducing obesity, diabetes mellitus, as well as preventing cardiovascular diseases. Green tea is playing a very important role. There is so much awareness about consuming green tea nowadays. Genistein, this is isoflavone. Genistein is again a very important flavonoid. So the important flavonoids are mentioned in this slide so that these important flavonoids can be explored further for doing further studies depending upon your domain. Maybe pharmacognostical studies, phytochemical studies, you can develop different formulations, and then you can conduct different preclinical and clinical studies as well. Then limonin, vitamin C, resveratrol, as I mentioned in the previous slide. Resveratrol, it's a very important polyphenol, stilbenoid. So it's found in red grapes, berries, red pine. Red pine is rich source of resveratrol. Curcumin again is very important ingredient. So all these fruits, vegetables mentioned here, all these molecules mentioned here, they have very important role in the prevention of metabolic syndrome and ultimately in the prevention of cardiovascular diseases. So these all important polyphenols mentioned in this slide should be explored further for doing further studies. Then clinical evidence for cardioprotective potential of garlic. Garlic has been used since ages, since ancient times, due to its important properties. It contains allicin, it contains 33 sulfur compounds. They all have one or the other important effects. So let us see what the results of these important studies conducted on garlic. In a meta-analysis of 39 random control trials enrolling 2,298 mild to moderate hypercholesterolemic participants, the consumption of garlic extracts for at least 2 months showed a reduction of LDL cholesterol up to the level of 9 mg. The beneficial effects in mild hypertension have also been reported. So this is very important finding involving 39 random control trials, where LDL cholesterol was reduced up to 9 mg per deciliter, and mild hypotensive effect has also been noticed. Then in the other study from 5 random control clients showed that hypercholesterolemic patients treated with garlic had a mean plasma cholesterol concentration that was 9% lower than that of patients treated with placebo. This is again an important finding. This is a significant finding. Garlic intake can produce a significant antiplatelet activity in humans as well. So garlic has antiplatelet activity as well, along with hypolipidemic activity. Garlic at a dose of 6 grams per day could be useful in the management of mild hypercholesterolemia. It has been established recently that part of the beneficial cardiovascular effects of garlic are due to the presence of allicin. Along with allicin, there are other compounds, other 32 compounds, sulfur-containing compounds, which have very important role in protecting heart against development of heart disease and protecting heart from oxidative stress. Then dose-dependent inhibition of platelet aggregation by garlic. Clinical studies with the dried garlic powder showed an average decrease in blood pressure of about 9%. It is again a significant finding, and this was produced by using only 0.6 gram garlic powder per day. Then in another study, double-blind trial, a beneficial effect of garlic on blood pressure and blood lipids in mildly hypertensive subjects was also demonstrated. Then in 1994, these scientists analyzed 16 trials with data from 952 subjects. In the meta-analysis, garlic in powder and non-powder form significantly lowered serum lipid levels over a 1 to 3 month period. Amongst the garlic powder preparations, effects appear to be similar across the daily dose range of 600 to 900 mg. So the dose has also been mentioned here. Accordingly, further work can be conducted. Suggested mechanisms of lipid lowering action of garlic are inhibition of HMG-CoA reductase and inhibition of absorption of dietary cholesterol. So these are very two important mechanisms of actions of garlic. HMG-CoA reductase. This is an important rate limiting enzyme. So in the mevalonic acid pathway, so if this enzyme is inhibited, HMG-CoA reductase enzyme is inhibited, then cholesterol is not synthesized. Cholesterol is not biosynthesized in the liver, and there is reduction of cholesterol level. There is a reduction in hypercholesterolemia. So this is very important mechanism. Through this mechanism, garlic is able to produce a very positive effect on lipid levels. Then there is a second mechanism is inhibition of absorption of dietary cholesterol. Cholesterol, triglycerides, they are consumed through food, normal food. So they are absorbed in small intestine after micelle formation. So they will produce they will inhibit the absorption of dietary cholesterol. In the subsequent slides, we will come to know how these will inhibit dietary cholesterol absorption. Further studies are required to finally confirm these cardioprotective effects and the molecules responsible for producing these effects. Then green tea. Green tea is a very important nutraceutical. It is in use in the current scenario. Green tea, there are green tea, oolong tea, black tea. There are 3 types of teas. So when green tea is fermented, then it will form black tea. Theaflavin is added in black tea, and important catechins are there in green tea. So some of these catechins are converted into theaflavin. The research is more research. If you compare green tea and black tea, you will see that more research is conducted on green tea. So that's why people think or believe that green tea is better than black tea. So let us see the results on green tea. A meta-analysis of 20 random control trials and 1536 participants showed a reduction of LDL cholesterol of 7.35 mg. This is a very significant finding as it involved 20, these are the results of 20 random control trials involving 1,536 participants. So this is a significant finding. The lipid lowering effects of green tea were found to be greater in random control trials with longer duration. So it shows that if you use green tea for longer periods, that is for many months or year, continue using green tea for a year, then we will see more beneficial effects steadily, slowly and steadily. Green tea extracts exert a mild but significant anti-hypertensive effect as well. The tested daily doses ranged from 250 mg to 1200 mg of green tea extract or 170 to 850 mg EGCG. Then green tea is associated with an improvement of flow-mediated dilatation. Wave velocity as well is improved. A meta-analysis of 10 trials involving 834 participants demonstrated that a statistically significant reduction in systolic and diastolic blood pressure was produced by black or green tea consumption. A recent meta-analysis on the effects of green tea intake on risk of cardiovascular disease indicated that the consumption of green tea is associated with reduced risk of myocardial infarction and stroke. So this is meta-analysis of recent results. So this is a very important, significant finding that if we continue using green tea for long periods, then the chances of risk of myocardial infarction, heart attack, and stroke are minimized. A meta-analysis of 14 randomized control trials, including 1136 subjects, found that administration of green tea resulted in significant reductions in total cholesterol and LDL cholesterol without altering HDL cholesterol. Finally, a meta-analysis of 17 trials involving 1,133 subjects revealed that green tea consumption was associated with significantly reduced fasting glucose and HbA1c levels. So it can be inferred that it can be concluded that green tea has multiple effects. It reduces blood cholesterol level, it reduces blood pressure also, it has positive effects in diabetes as well, and it reduces obesity as well, ultimately. So how this tea is producing its effect? Tea and its catechins are producing effects by suppressing reactive oxygen species and then stimulate nitric oxide synthase, protecting, then improving. So ultimately, endothelial function is improved, as we have been discussing all through, that it is very important to improve endothelial function to prevent deterioration of heart, to prevent cardiovascular diseases, or to protect our heart from development of cardiovascular disease. So this is very important to improve endothelial function. Once metabolic syndrome has developed, then our role is to improve endothelial function so that we can prevent the progress of the disease, protecting mitochondria from damage, decreasing angiotensin by inhibiting ACE, suppressing hypertension, suppressing hyperglycemia, improving cardiac hypertrophy. So these are very important effects of tea consumption. And foods that are bad for heart, we should know as a pharmaceutical educationist, academicians, researchers, scientists, we ought to know because we are healthcare providers. Our aim is in pharmacy oath, we have read that our aim is the pharmacist's role is to work towards the betterment of the society. Pharmacist is dedicated to for the cause of the society. So by these important rules, we can counsel the society, we can counsel the public through pharmaceutical care, we can prevent, we can counsel the patients, or we can counsel the general public. So we should know what are foods bad for heart. All these foods mentioned here: soda, bacon, red meat, sugar, salt, fat. We all know. We all know that these are bad. But I have mentioned here so that you can again rethink that whether to use these foods or not. White rice, bread, pasta, pizza, fast food, burgers, alcohol, deep fried foods, kachori, samosa, bhatura. We can't avoid, but we can reduce their frequency. Because in the modern life, we don't get anything else. We get only samosa, bhatura, kachori. So you can say what to do. And sometimes we feel that we should have all these things, but we can minimize their intake. We can reduce the frequency of their intake. So flavored full fat milk, dairy products, these are all bad for heart. They are liable to increase our body fat. They are liable to increase our this abdominal obesity. Abdominal obesity is really very toxic, very deleting, very toxic and very harmful and very alarming. So we should be alert. We should be conscious about our belly. Now, these are foods that are good for heart: nuts, legumes, fruits and vegetables, flaxseed. As I have been mentioning, we should work for flaxseed. Flaxseed is very important nutraceutical. We should use whole grain cereals. Then soya protein. Soybean is very important. We can work on these things. We can explore these nutrients. We can explore these nutraceuticals, right? Functional food, flaxseeds, whole grains. We can explore these further. Citrus fruits, turmeric. So now whatever we have mentioned here, these are all depicted here, that how all these nutraceuticals which have been mentioned so far. So all the nutraceutical role is over in my presentation. Now all these nutraceuticals holistically, they work holistically, and our approach should be holistic to treat or to manage or to prevent any disease or any risk factor, or to manage any syndrome. Now see, all these variety fibers, probiotics, lupin, berberine, it's an alkaloid, bergamot, this is citrus fruit. So all these psyllium is dietary fiber, we all know, soybean. So all these, how they will work? They will increase bile salts excretion. Bile salts excretion is how they will increase bile salts excretion? By stimulating bile salts hydrolase enzyme. Then you can see on the left artichoke, stenols, bergamot. They inhibit the formation of cholesterol esters. By inhibiting ACAT inhibition, acyl-CoA cholesterol acyl transferase is an enzyme. If it is inhibited, then cholesterol esters are not formed, and when cholesterol esters are not formed, soluble micelles are not formed. Then green tea, as we have mentioned in the previous slide, probiotics, sterols, they will inhibit the formation of solubilized micelles. Through competition, they will compete with cholesterol for formation of solubilized micelles. So solubilized micelles are not formed. So these are important mechanisms mentioned here. Curcumin, it will inhibit the NPC1L1. Niemann and C1-like factor transporter ABC, ATP binding cassette A1. So these are inhibited. These are transporters of cholesterol. NPC1L1 is inhibited. So now the cholesterol will not be transported across the membrane, across the lumen membrane, across the membrane of the GIT. So this is very important. So these are important mechanisms. Inhibition of cholesterol absorption is here. These bergamot, psyllium, soluble fibers. So this slide is showing all the mechanisms at multiple sites. Even a single fiber, a single nutraceutical is acting through two or three mechanisms, and if we combine two or three nutraceuticals, then they will act at multiple sites. So the chances of treatment, chances of management, and chances of prevention of the disease are increased. Now, again, you can see the mechanisms which we were discussing previously while we mentioned different individual nutraceuticals are mentioned here. So these are the roles of green tea, garlic, how they are producing their effect. They will inhibit the cholesterol synthesis. How? They will inhibit the enzyme HMG-CoA reductase. So when this enzyme is reduced, then cholesterol is not formed. Then bergamot and berberine, they will increase cholesterol turnover and formation of bile salts. Why cholesterol turnover is increased? Because bile salts are hydrolyzed in the GIT. So there is a need for more and more bile salts. So in the process, more and more cholesterol is being consumed. So cholesterol turnover is increased. Omega-3 fatty acids, they will reduce VLDL synthesis. Lupin and soya, they are working by different mechanisms. On the right side, you can see omega-3 fatty acids will inhibit the triglyceride synthesis by inhibiting the enzyme diacylglyceride reductase. So these are important enzymes which are being inhibited. So triglyceride is not formed. Then berberine and curcumin, what this enzyme will do, LDL receptors are increased. They will increase LDL receptors. So cholesterol uptake is increased. LDL cholesterol will come back to the liver as more and more LDL receptors are available. So these are the important mechanism of action, so that we can trust on these nutraceuticals. That's why I have tried to show through these two slides that these mechanisms have been established through clinical studies. This is global nutraceutical market size and forecast from 2015 to 2024. This you can see there is a cumulative growth rate 7.2% from 2016 to 2024. There is a steady rise in global nutraceutical market. And you can say US is the major player. I have already told you that there is a high awareness in the US about the role of nutraceuticals because there is very fast life in the US people are leading a very fast life, and due to advertisements and other study materials, they have beginning to realize, and through positive results as well, they have begun to realize that nutraceuticals are very important for sustaining our health, for improving the health, for maintaining our health, and for preventing as a preventing measures also, nutraceuticals play an important role. Now, this is the conclusion of my presentation. The unhealthy lifestyle, dyslipidemia, and hypertension are the major risk factors for metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome is a very concerning term actually. This has not been explored. There is not much awareness about metabolic syndrome. That's why I have that's why I have chosen this topic of metabolic syndrome, because metabolic syndrome, if it is not addressed, if it is not managed, if it is not considered, then it can lead to the development of heart disease. And we have seen that heart disease is the leading cause of death globally. So, and this is a silent killer. We are not aware that whether we have developed metabolic syndrome or not. But so that's why I have mentioned the risk factors of metabolic syndrome. Then the management of metabolic syndrome is a major target in CVD prevention. Metabolic syndrome is a major target. Yeah, if we want to prevent CVD, cardiovascular disease, if we want to prevent the development of cardiovascular disease, then we need to address metabolic syndrome first, because once metabolic syndrome is complicated, then it will lead to the development of cardiovascular disease along with development of other diseases like diabetes mellitus. So we should know at which condition we are, We all should know as a pharmaceutical scientist or pharmacy professional that what is the status of the society around us and how we can contribute in managing metabolic syndrome, because we are eating fast food. Fast food is stressful life, fast food is stressful life, so they are contributing in the formation or development of metabolic syndrome. Protective effects against cardiovascular disease or metabolic syndrome have been demonstrated for several foods and dietary supplements, thus presenting new opportunities for the prevention and management of CVD and metabolic syndrome. The evidence suggests that this approach is very promising. This approach means the approach of utilizing nutraceuticals in one or the other way. We can combine different nutraceuticals, we can develop some medicine, we can develop some therapeutic regimen. We should work accordingly as per our domains. Current knowledge about the beneficial effects of nutraceuticals will have an impact of nutritional therapy. Yes, whatever current knowledge we have, the current knowledge is very promising. The current knowledge is very encouraging, very promising, and it has opened new avenues for doing further research on nutraceuticals. So it will definitely have an impact on nutritional therapy, because more and more public, more and more citizens and government authorities, scientists will feel motivated and inspired by looking at the beneficial effects of nutraceuticals through their important findings, and they will again go on for contribute. They will again contribute for doing further research based on the previous research conducted. So, but in the end, we cannot say with full confidence that yes, you do this thing, it will be relieved. We cannot say. Still, a lot of ground needs to be covered. A lot of studies are required to be conducted to evaluate the efficacy and safety of the potential cardioprotective nutraceuticals. So this is all from my side. Thank you so much. Thank you. This is all from my side.
Thank you, sir. Sir, there are some queries from the delegates.
Okay.
The first query is by Sagarika Maji. What is the current regulatory status of nutraceuticals?
Let me write. Regulatory status. Okay. So as far as regulatory status is concerned, currently, as these are not drugs, these are not medicines. So in India, if you speak about India, they are not regulated in as the drugs are being regulated. These drug regulatory bodies are not regulating these, because these are regulated by, these are considered in the categories of foods still. So Food Safety Authority of India is controlling this. So one has to take permission from Food Safety Authority of India. It came into existence in 2006. So one has to take permission, and there are certain guidelines of Food Safety Security Authority of India. So these guidelines state that there should be proper labeling on the label. All these expiry date and all these things should be mentioned. All these ingredients should be mentioned. So this is, in this way it is regulated. No need to present safety and all these studies report. No need to mention all these things. So these are considered in the category of foods only, food or food products. And if you see in US, US FDA is controlling. But in US, if you see the US trend, US FDA is just controlling nutraceuticals, in the sense that nutraceuticals which are being marketed by the manufacturing companies, are these nutraceuticals safe to use or not? But there is no need to take approval from them. In India, there is a need to take approval from FSSAI. This is okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Next question is from Neelam Singh. What types of nutraceuticals need to be developed in present era of COVID-19?
In COVID-19, okay. In COVID-19, we should develop those nutraceuticals which will enhance our immune system, those nutraceuticals which have established efficacy to protect our heart, which have established efficacy to protect our this pancreas and liver. So in this way, coenzyme Q10 we can work through. I have mentioned through my slide that coenzyme Q10 should be given due importance. Flax seed should be utilized. Then all these antibacterial, those herbs which have antibacterial activities should be explored, like conventional drugs, neem, tulsi, giloy, these types of herbs. In fact, because nutraceutical herbs also are the parts of nutraceuticals, there are different categories of nutraceuticals. Herbs is one of them. So we should explore the use of giloy, tulsi, neem, and all these black pepper, and along with CoQ10. This is so these 5-6 herbs can be explored for devising a remedy in COVID-19.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Next question is from Alok Sembal. What is new dietary ingredients in a dietary supplement?
New dietary ingredients.
Ingredient in a dietary supplement.
Yeah, in a new dietary ingredients, dietary supplement. Okay, see, new dietary ingredient, omega-3 fatty acid is an important ingredient. Then vitamin C, vitamin E is an important ingredient. And if you see, so these are important ingredients in as dietary supplements. Then Arjuna is also, if you consider in respect of heart, this depends upon the for which we are liable to develop which disease. Arjuna Park is good. Then soybean we can use. So dietary supplement, omega-3 fatty acid is very important, and we should use mustard oil in our cooking. And this is very important dietary supplement. Mustard of people, there is misconception that mustard oil is bad for heart, but recent reports has shown that mustard oil is good. And all these people from ancient times had been using mustard oil, and reports have shown that it contains unsaturated fatty acids as well as polyunsaturated fatty acids. So we should use cinnamon also, we should use dietary supplement. So these spices are also important dietary supplements. So such types of things we can use from all the things which I have shown. Polyunsaturated fatty acids, obviously we have to use. So for using, then we can use cow's milk. Cow's milk is good. And similarly, we can use, as I have already, flax seed, we should use flax seed. Black currant we should use. Okay, these are important ingredients of free fatty acids as well as polyphenols.
So in continuity with this, he further asked, do omega-3 fatty acids have any protective role against dementia? Do omega-3 fatty acids have any protective role against dementia?
Okay. So these 3 fatty acids, I will again mention the fatty acids from flaxseed. I have mentioned fatty acids from sunflower oil, soybean. So these are important fatty acids: flax seeds, soybean, and safflower oil. So these 3 important fatty acids will definitely help in relieving dementia. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for sharing your knowledge on nutraceuticals as therapeutic agents for the prevention and treatment of metabolic syndrome. You have really refreshed our fundamental concepts of metabolic syndrome, whose incidence and prevalence has increased enormously nowadays. Your elaboration about various nutraceuticals specifically acting as cardioprotective was an eye-opener, as they may serve as effective alternatives to current pharmaceutical treatments. We owe you for sharing such an update on cardioprotective nutraceuticals in this pandemic era. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Madhu, and thank you all the delegates and all these organizers. Best wishes to you. Hearty congratulations from my side.